In 1989, a select group of both Army elements and Navy SEALs poured into Panama with a mission to find and capture Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega. Under orders from Commander-in-Chief George H. W. Bush, Noriega was captured and deposed. After a 40-year sentence, Noriega was extradited to France from the United States and convicted of separate charges, making him the longest-held prisoner of war in U.S. history. Although the operation was ironically named Operation Just Cause, questions as to its legitimacy persist. The U.S. invasion was not backed by other nations, primarily because it only involved U.S. interests. Seeking NATO's blessing would have been useless, since the main objectives of the operation only pertained to U.S. citizens. President Bush Sr. suggested that an invasion of Panama was necessary to restore order, promote democracy, protect the nearly 35,000 Americans in Panama, end the drug trafficking to the U.S. propagated by Noriega, and most importantly, secure the Panama Canal and ensure its use for American shipping. As negotiated in the Torrijos-Carter Treaties of 1977, the canal would be renationalized to the Panamanians, and in exchange, U.S. ships would continue to have access to it, with Noriega threatening to shut down the Panama Canal to U.S. shipping through increased pressure on President Bush to resolve the situation. Since Noriega came to power, and even in the years preceding his ascent to his position, Panama had been struck with misfortune. Originally a part of Colombia, the U.S. provided aid to revolutionaries fighting for Panamanian independence. The revolution created a power vacuum, which over the years would be filled with various dictators and military leaders, the most recent of which being Noriega. Manuel Noriega took control of the country by promoting himself to the position of General of the National Guard. While he was not president, he did manipulate the vote to ensure his puppet candidate would win. This illegitimate power was undemocratic and completely contradictory to what the U.S. government wished to align itself with. During the late 1980s, the threat of communism in Latin America was a present one. The Contras, a quasi-terrorist organization fighting for control of Nicaragua, was funded by the United States on the sole basis that they resisted the Sandinistas, a Marxist group seeking communism in Nicaragua. When it was discovered the Contras were peddling hardcore narcotics into the U.S., Congress refused to fund them. Noriega, who was a self-proclaimed neutral in Latin America, at certain times supported the Contras, which won him support of the U.S. for a short period of time. The real question, almost 30 years after the invasion, persists. Was a U.S. intervention in Panama justified? As President Bush stated, Manuel Noriega was financing drug operations in Latin America, where the powerful, highly addictive narcotic cocaine is produced. During the post-Reagan era, drugs were thought of as a national epidemic, and Americans familiar with the Just Say No program advanced by Nancy Reagan opposed any person involved with illicit substances. Noriega was accused of funding and operating among smugglers and growers alike and bringing cocaine into the United States, where it would then be sold to the populace. The question of state-sponsored drug trafficking definitively justifies actions against Noriega, but a more politically correct response would have been to lobby the United Nations for embargoes or sanctions, as opposed to direct action without the approval of any international body. Along with drug trafficking, Noriega also was vehemently anti-American and frequently criticized American policy abroad. The invasion was viewed as unnecessary by other nations. While it did resolve the issue of deposing a dictator, it was termed an overreaction by Finland. Perhaps the largest and most influential international body, the United Nations, had trouble as to how to resolve the situation in Panama after Noriega's removal. Widespread looting was still happening, and there was currently no executive figure. Soviet nations and Nicaragua called for a person associated with Noriega's regime to be the leader of the broken nation, yet the U.S. attempted to install its own man, Guillermo Endara, to control Panama. This was seen by international bodies as an imperialistic move to attempt to further U.S. control over Panama and take de facto control over the country. The invasion was also seen as an act of aggression to the entire Caribbean region, which had seen the United States military also intervene in Grenada and the Dominican Republic in recent years, in the interest of protecting American citizens residing in those areas. Don Rojas of the Philadelphia Tribune stated, President Bush claims the invasion is justified in order to defend democracy in Panama. Its real objectives, however, are to impose by military force a U.S. client regime on the people of Panama and to maintain control of the Panama Canal and the U.S. military bases on Panamanian soil. This quote demonstrates that media correspondents saw the act by the United States as a power move to further its interests and disregarded the claims that it was allegedly a product of promoting democracy. As reporters on the scene in Panama noted, although Noriega was removed, elements of the PDF continued to fight. This, combined with widespread vandalism and looting, created a war zone in the Panamanian capital. U.S. analysts also reported that the situation in Panama would take time to stabilize, and continued U.S. support would be necessary to secure the area and protect American interests. In the end, the invasion was one of necessity.